Hello and welcome to Begotten God TV. My name is Eliseo Rodriguez. We are going to be speaking about what the Doctrine of the Trinity is in this video. The video before, our first video, was about whether or not the church could be wrong and make a mistake in doctrine. Is it possible? Has it happened before? And will it happen again? Or can it happen again? And when we looked at it, we realized and understood that it is very possible. The Israelites, they've fallen away and came back to God repetitively, and the church can make the same mistakes and accidentally view God in a wrong way, or allow things that are not allowable in the church. So we're not immune to that. That's what the first video was. Please check it out if you haven't watched it. And then today we're going to look at what the Doctrine of the Trinity is, because we have to define it and make sure that we understand what the doctrine is. So what we're going to do is we're going to the Athanasian Creed. It's a very popular creed. It explains the foundational statements of the Doctrine of the Trinity in very great detail, and gives us an idea of what the Doctrine of the Trinity states. A creed is like it's a church statement of what a doctrine means. And so we're going to look at the very first foundational statement. Foundational statement number 1 for the Doctrine of the Trinity. And these are the most important parts of the Doctrine of the Trinity. There probably are more and many facets of the Doctrine of the Trinity, but these are the essential ones. These are the foundational ones that everything else is built upon. Number 1 is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are uncreated or not existing by creation. This foundational statement says that the Father and the Son and the Spirit were not created. Nobody created them. Nobody started their life. Okay? That is the doctrinal statement number 1. All three of them were not created. Okay? Foundational statement number 2 of the Doctrine of the Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are limitless. In other words, there is nothing that they do not, that can hinder them from doing what they want. They're free to do anything. A limit would be like not being allowed to go into somebody's house, or going into somebody's yard, or go into a secure area. Limitations are when you are not able to do something that other people are, or other persons are. So when the doctrinal statement of the Doctrine of the Trinity that says that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are limitless, it means that there is not something that one person can do that they cannot. There is nothing that they cannot do that others can. Okay? Obviously, they're not going to sin, but what this means is that they can do. There's nothing that limits them. There's no limitations. There's nothing that they cannot do or cannot have that the other can or anyone else can. So limits. And when you want to think about this, you want to think about, being able to go into a secure area. If one person can go into a secure area, then and someone else cannot, that means that they're limited for some reason from going into the secure area. So that would mean that they are capable of doing it, but they're not allowed. So for the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, there's nothing that they're limited in. They have no limits. So number 3, foundational statement of the Doctrine of the Trinity is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are eternal. This is a little bit different than being uncreated. Uncreated means that nobody created you. No one. So there's nobody higher or stronger that created you, right? Eternal means that they have existed from now, right, And everything before now, they have existed and will exist. In the past, in the present, and in the future, they will always exist. So eternal means always existed. Never was there a time when they did not exist. That is what eternal means. So when they say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are eternal, that means that they, all three of them, have existed, and there has never been a time when they did not exist. Okay? Number 4, foundational statement of the doctrine of the Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are omnipotent, or another way to say it is almighty, meaning they have all power. There is nothing more powerful than them. There is no power that they do not possess. All power is retained in them, and they can do anything. There is nothing that they cannot do. Okay? Number 5 foundational statement is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are co-equal, meaning none is below or above the other. They are all equal. No one's better than no one else. They're all equal, one and the same. Number 6 foundational statement is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are one homoousios, meaning that they are of one substance. They are the same substance. So whatever substance that is, they're not venturing to say what the substance is, but they are saying that whatever that substance is, they all three are that substance. So they are one homoousios. So they're all the same substance. And then number 7 is one God in Trinity and a Trinity in unity. That means that they are 3 in 1 and 1 who is 3. So that's number 7 doctrinal statement of the doctrine of the Trinity. Okay, so now that we have discussed the foundational documented statements of what the doctrine of the Trinity is, okay, now that we have that established, I want to start to answer a couple of questions. You may ask yourself, well, where did the doctrine of the Trinity come from if it didn't come from the Bible? And there is this belief system back in the past with the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is where we get the doctrine of the Trinity. And that belief was that that the Pope could make statements and that he heard from God, and those things that he said were like hearing from God himself, pretty much. That if the Pope said anything or declared anything or made a decision, that he was pretty much speaking for God. Like he could not make a mistake. He was infallible, because that's why they call it papal infallibility. Is saying the Pope is pretty much God on earth, and when he says something, it's pure. It's like hearing from God himself. There's not going to be a mistake or an error in that. So with that kind of belief system in the Catholic Church, we can understand where the doctrine of the Trinity could come from. When speaking about the Council of Nicaea, because like I said, the doctrine of the Trinity did not come into the church. It was introduced into the church in the 4th century, 300 years after Jesus died. So 300 years after Jesus died, the doctrine of the Trinity was introduced into the church as a doctrine. So you might say, does that mean that the apostles did not know that, or were not taught that? And I guess for a Trinitarian, they could say, yeah, they didn't know about the doctrine of the Trinity with the apostles. And that's one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is to say, maybe it's not supposed to be a doctrine. Maybe they didn't teach it because it's unbiblical. Maybe they didn't know about it because it's not actually part of the doctrine. There are a lot of questions that can be asked about why it took 300 years for God to teach the church about the Trinity when the church of the first century, I'm talking about the apostles now, were not informed about the doctrine of the Trinity. I find that hard to believe. The apostles are hanging out with Jesus. Paul is getting direct teaching from God and from Jesus for 3 years before he ever talks to an apostle. And they never got anything about the doctrine of the Trinity. But in the 4th century, we're to believe that all of a sudden this doctrine, God just dropped the doctrine into our laps and gave us this great revelation. Now, if I'm to teach something new, which it feels like I'm trying to teach something new, because almost the whole church believes the doctrine of the Trinity, and I understand that. But it seems like I'm trying to introduce a new teaching to the church, something foreign, something unusual, something confusing. And you might say, well, I don't want to believe in anything other than the doctrine of the Trinity. And I understand what you feel and how you feel and what you're saying. I understand that. I can respect that. But what I am really trying to teach here is to bring you back to the teaching that the apostles taught originally. This is the church that was around between the 300 years before the doctrine of the Trinity was introduced into the church. That belief system that was there prior to the doctrine of the Trinity, that doctrine, that's what I'm trying to teach you. And it's not a new doctrine. It's not something new and unheard of or unseen. It's the original doctrine. And that's what you should be wanting to have, is the same teaching, the same understanding as the first church. When they say the first church, that's the first century church, right? With the apostles and the church, how they understood back then, when the miracles and the signs and the wonders and the way they understood Jesus and the Father, that's what you should want. And if you do want that, then stick around, watch my videos, because I'm going to get into that. I'm going to try to teach you everything I know about the doctrine of the Trinity. And this it seems like a new doctrine, but it's not a new doctrine. It's the original doctrine. We can get into the Council of Nicaea for a moment, and I don't want to get too deep into it because we're going to reach it later on in the video series, later on in the year. But the Council of Nicaea, they had Arius, and then they had Alexander. And there was a split. The Arians and the Trinitarians were having a problem. The Emperor Constantine was alive then, and he was wanting peace between the factions of the church. And so he just kind of took one side and said, that's the one we're going to go with. I don't necessarily think that he cared what was going on. He also changed the worship day from Saturday, which is the Jewish Sabbath day, to Sunday, which was the same worship day as another religious group. But they crowned him Pope, or whatever they want to call him. He counseled he headed the council for to find out if we're going to be Trinitarians or non-Trinitarian church. And then, but what I want to point out is that there's a lot of people who are lying, and I want you to recognize this, because these are Christians who are lying. These are Christians who are telling mistruths and not telling the entire truth. You can find out a lie by finding evidence, against what they're saying, and then you wonder, well, why would you lie about something like that? And then it kind of loses their credibility. But if you look, there were other councils before the Council of Nicaea, and Arians, which are non-Trinitarian Christians, they won those battles, a lot of them. And then this one, the Council of Nicaea, is the one they lost. But after that succeeding years, the Arians took control again and changed it back. And there was a huge battle back and forth about who Jesus was and who the Father was, and the whole view there. Well, when you get to the point to where you realize that the church, a lot of the church believed that Jesus was not this Trinity, and they fought, and they went into all kinds of struggles about who Jesus was. And so it wasn't one guy. Christians like to say, oh, it was Arius and a few of his people that were starting a problem, but that doesn't make any sense, because I'm not going to, like, let's say the United States was wanting to split because one guy was saying he didn't like some policies in America. You don't have a meeting of the church worldwide. You don't call leaders from the church worldwide to one place to discuss an issue that one guy has with a couple of friends about doctrine. You don't do that. It has to be church-wide. It has to be a church-wide problem for you to call all the leadership in the known world to one place to discuss a doctrinal issue. So for them to say that it was just Arius and his followers, that is a lie. And I call them all out as liars. I don't care who they are. I don't care if they're they've been studying the Bible for 1,000 years and they're standing in front of me and they're telling me that I'm incorrect. They're lying. There's documented proof that there's no way that it was just one guy. You don't call a council of the church worldwide because one guy has a problem with doctrine. It has to be church-wide. It has to be a split in every single church worldwide. So that means that half of the whole church was struggling with this new doctrine of the Trinity that was trying to creep in. And it looks like the doctrine of the Trinity won. The reason the doctrine of the Trinity won, and I don't know why some people don't even acknowledge the fact that the emperor of Rome threatened everyone at the council, all the church leaders that were together at the Council of Nicaea. He threatened whoever did not vote for the Trinity was going to be expelled from the country, like they're going to be excommunicated. In other words, you're kicked out of the kingdom. You're going to go to the worst regions out there. You're not going to be part of this. It's like saying you're going to be kicked out of the United States if you don't vote this way. Imagine if the President of the United States was heading up a council trying to decide what the church was going to be. And let's say that the President said before the meeting, if anyone votes against the way that I vote or want, all of you guys will be kicked out of the United States. And let's say that the United States covered most of Europe, all of it, and we lived in the heart of Europe. And there's not very many places to go. It's like they almost own the whole world. You're not going to say no. You're not going to get kicked out of, to live on the sea, or, get kicked out of the country that you love. So they did that. They also made it illegal. They made it a law that said it is illegal to believe against the Trinity in Rome. These are things that you've got to look up and realize that when they had this council, they had already set up systems to make sure that they won. And that's not the way Jesus operates. Jesus doesn't operate that way. Jesus doesn't threaten. Jesus doesn't make it illegal to believe something. This is what was going on in the church, and this is the truth. This is the way the doctrine of the Trinity was introduced into the church. The church was threatened. All the church leadership worldwide was threatened with excommunication if they didn't vote. the way that he wanted. So we're going to look at the doctrine of the Trinity. The church has believed it for a long time. It was not in the original church, and I'm going to prove it. I have studied all of the early church fathers, and I will show you everything that I've got on the early church fathers. And guess what? None of them taught the Trinity. And I already know, before you even start, I already know that many people have already taught for years upon years, thousands and thousands of years, or at least 1,000 years, that the early church fathers did believe the Trinity. They have explained that to other people. It's in books all around the world. But they're leaving stuff out. They're leaving stuff out that they don't want to tell you. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to prove to you that the early church, and I'm talking about the church leaders that were alive while the apostles were alive. I'm not talking about the church after the apostles died. I'm talking about the people that believed with the apostles, that were church leaders with the apostles, that were appointed by the apostles, who were the disciples of the apostles. These are the guys I'm talking about. These guys, the original after the apostles and during the apostles, who died with the apostles, did not believe, did not teach, did not talk about. Well, they did talk about it, but they talked against the doctrine of the Trinity. I have proof that they talked against the doctrine of the Trinity. But for this video only, we are talking about the foundational truths. So this is the foundational truths of the doctrine of the Trinity. The next video, we're going to examine the very first foundation and see if it has any support in the Bible. Thank you for visiting my video. We're going to be making videos as quickly as possible. I'm really new at this, so bear with me if I have technical difficulties or something doesn't look perfect. I am learning how to do this. This is the first time I've ever tried to do a series like this. But I've done my research, and I have undeniable truth. So that is what the doctrine of the Trinity is. If you have any comments about the doctrine of the Trinity, please leave them below or message me, and I'll get back to you. Thank you. This is Begotten God TV. My name is Eliseo Rodriguez. See you next time.